The night was cold on Jeju Island. Gina sat alone in the control room of the deep space array, surrounded by screens that showed nothing but static and empty graphs. She had been working here for 7 years, listening to the stars. 7 years of silence. Outside, 12 massive radio dishes pointed at the sky like giant ears. They listened to everything. Distant galaxies. Dead stars. The empty spaces between worlds. And every night, Gina hoped to hear something that would prove humanity was not alone. She poured herself another cup of cold coffee and rubbed her tired eyes. The clock on the wall showed 3 in the morning. Most of her team had gone home hours ago. Only Gina remained, as she always did, watching the data streams flow across her monitors like digital rivers going nowhere. Her father had worked in a place like this. 20 years ago, he had been one of Korea's best astronomers. Then one day, he went to work and never came back. The government said it was an accident. A fire in the laboratory. They never let her see the body. They never explained what he had been working on. Gina became an astronomer to find answers. So far, she had found only more questions. She was about to give up for the night when something strange appeared on her screen. A small spike in the data. Probably nothing. Probably just interference from a satellite or a plane. She had seen thousands of false signals over the years. But this one was different. Gina leaned forward and adjusted her equipment. The spike appeared again. And again. It was regular, rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat. She traced the signal's path through the computer system. It was not coming from space. It was coming from space and bouncing back. Something out there was reflecting Earth's own radio waves back at the planet. Like a mirror in the sky. Her hands began to shake. She ran more tests. She checked her equipment 3 times. The results were always the same. There was something in the asteroid belt, millions of kilometers away, and it was deliberately blocking humanity's signals from reaching the rest of the galaxy. For a long moment, Gina just sat there, staring at the screen. Then she laughed. It was a strange, hollow sound in the empty room. All those years of listening, all those decades of humanity shouting into the void, and someone had been covering their mouth the entire time. She should have reported it. She should have called her superiors, contacted the government, followed the proper procedures. Instead, she did something that would change the course of human history. She aimed the most powerful transmitter on Earth directly at the object in the asteroid belt, and she sent a message. "We know you're there." 4 words. Simple and clear. A declaration that humanity was no longer blind. The response came 6 hours later. Gina had fallen asleep at her desk when the alarms started screaming. She jumped up, knocking over her cold coffee, and stared at the screens in disbelief. Every single dish in the array was receiving the same signal. It was powerful. It was clear. And it was definitely not human. The message was short, translated by computers into rough, broken language. Quarantine broken. Containment protocols activated. Remain silent. Judgment comes. Gina's phone rang. It was the Korean Space Agency. They had detected the signal too. So had NASA. So had every space agency on Earth. Within an hour, the news had spread to every government in the world. Humanity was not alone. And whatever was out there was not happy that they had been discovered. On the other side of the planet, Han Do-yeon was having a very different kind of night. He sat in the pilot's seat of his cargo ship, the Silver Moon, watching the Earth grow smaller through his window. He was carrying supplies to the mining colonies on Luna. Basic stuff. Food, medicine, equipment parts. Nothing exciting. Diane was 52 years old, with gray hair and tired eyes. He had flown fighter jets for the Korean Air Force for 20 years before retiring to this quieter life. He liked the peace of space, the silence, the simple routine of flying from one point to another. His co-pilot, Baek Jung-ho, was younger and louder. He talked constantly, filling the silence with jokes and stories and complaints about the food. Dayan pretended to be annoyed, but secretly he appreciated the company. "Did you hear the news?" Jung-ho asked, looking at his tablet with wide eyes. "What news?" "Someone made contact. With aliens. Real aliens. They detected a signal from Jung-ho. If this is another one of your jokes, it's not a joke. Look." Jung-ho thrust the tablet at him. Dayan read the headlines. Then he read them again. Then he put down the tablet and stared out the window at the stars. "Well," he said slowly, "I suppose that changes things." Back on Earth, the world was going crazy. News channels broadcast nothing but the signal. Experts argued about what it meant. Religious leaders called it a sign from God or a test from the devil. Governments held emergency meetings behind closed doors. And Park Jina sat in an interrogation room, answering questions from men in dark suits who did not smile. "You sent an unauthorized transmission into deep space," one of them said. "Do you understand what you have done?" "I found proof that we are not alone," Jina replied. "I found proof that someone has been hiding us from the universe. Shouldn't you be thanking me?" The men did not thank her. They asked more questions. Where did she get the idea? Who told her to look for the signal? Was she working with anyone else? Gina answered honestly. She had been alone. She had followed her instincts. She had done what any scientist would do when they found evidence of something incredible. Finally, they let her go. But they did not let her leave. They took her to a military base where more people in uniforms waited to ask more questions. It was there that she met Yoon Tae-won, the Secretary General of the United Earth Defense Council. He was a thin man with kind eyes and a worried face. He looked like he had not slept in days. "Dr. Park," he said, shaking her hand, "you have started something very big. I hope you are ready for what comes next." "What has come next?" Gina asked. Taiwan led her to a window. Outside, soldiers were running everywhere. Planes were taking off. Ships were being loaded with equipment. "They are coming," Taiwan said quietly. The signal mentioned judgment. "We detected movement in the outer solar system. Multiple objects. Large ones. Moving toward Earth at speeds we cannot match. How long do we have?" 3 days. Maybe 4. Gina felt the weight of those words settle on her shoulders. She had broken the silence. Now the galaxy was sending its response. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Taiwan shook his head. "Don't be. We were always going to find out eventually. Better to face the truth than to live in a lie." He turned to face her. "Now, Dr. Park, I need you to help us understand what we are dealing with. You found them. You made contact. That makes you the closest thing we have to an expert." Gina looked out at the chaos below. Somewhere out there, beyond the moon, beyond Mars, beyond everything humanity had ever touched, something ancient and powerful was coming to judge them. She took a deep breath. "Then let's get to work." The silence had been broken, and Earth would never be the same again. The ships arrived on the 3rd day. 17 of them appeared at the edge of the solar system, near the orbit of Neptune. They were enormous. The smallest was the size of a mountain. The largest was bigger than some moons. They hung in the darkness like sleeping giants, their surfaces covered in strange patterns that glowed with soft blue light. Every telescope on Earth turned to watch them. Every satellite adjusted its cameras. The whole world held its breath. Gina stood in the command center of the United Earth Defense Council, surrounded by screens showing different views of the alien fleet. Beside her, Taiwan spoke quietly into a phone, coordinating with leaders from every nation. The room was full of generals, scientists, and politicians, all of them staring at the images with a mixture of fear and wonder. "They call themselves the Galactic Concord," said a young woman at one of the computer stations. This was Kwan Mai-Ray, Gina's younger sister. She had spent her whole career studying how aliens might communicate. Now she was finally getting the chance to use her knowledge. "How do you know that?" asked a general with a stern face. "They're broadcasting," Mai-Ray explained. "On every frequency, in every language they can figure out. They've been listening to us for a long time. They know our words." She pressed a button and a voice filled the room. It was strange and mechanical, like a computer trying to sound human. "People of Earth, you have violated the quarantine protocol established by the Galactic Concord 3000 standard cycles ago. Your unauthorized transmission has triggered containment procedures. You will surrender the individual responsible for this breach. You will cease all attempts at interstellar communication. You will accept Concord authority over your world. You have 72 hours to comply. Failure to comply will result in planetary sterilization." The room was silent. Gina felt everyone's eyes turn toward her. She was the individual responsible. She was the one they wanted. "Planetary sterilization," Taiwan repeated slowly. "They mean to kill us all if we don't give them what they want," the general said, looking at Gina with cold eyes. "No," Taiwan's voice was firm. "We will not hand over any human being to face alien judgment. That is not who we are. With respect, sir, one life against 8 billion. I said no." Taiwan stepped forward, his quiet authority filling the room. "The moment we start sacrificing our own people to appease a threat, we stop being worth saving. We will find another way." The general fell silent, but Gina could see the disagreement in his eyes. She understood. If giving her up would save the world, shouldn't she volunteer? Wasn't that the right thing to do? But Mai-Ray grabbed her hand and squeezed it tight. "Don't even think about it," she whispered. "We'll figure this out, together." The next 72 hours were the longest of Gina's life. While politicians argued and generals planned, Mai-Ray worked without rest to decode more of the Concord's transmissions. She barely ate. She barely slept. Dark circles formed under her eyes, but she refused to stop. On the second day, she found something that changed everything. "Earth isn't the first," she announced, her voice shaking. She pulled up files on the main screen. "I found records in their broadcasts, archives. There have been 47 quarantined species in the history of the Concord. What happened to them?" Taiwan asked. Marie's face was pale. "They were neutralized. All of them. Within a century of being discovered. The Concord finds species they consider dangerous, isolates them, and then—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "They killed them," Gina said quietly. "Every single one. Earth is the only quarantined world that still has life on it. And that's only because we never knew we were being watched." The room erupted in shouting. Generals demanded immediate military action. Politicians called for emergency broadcasts to the public. Scientists argued about whether the information could be trusted. Through it all, Gina stared at the screen. 47 species. Entire civilizations wiped out because some galactic government decided they were too dangerous to exist. And now humanity was next on the list. "Why?" she asked. "Why did they quarantine us in the first place? What did we do?" Mai-Ray shook her head. "I don't know yet. But whatever the reason, they've been afraid of us for 3,000 years. Afraid enough to build that thing in the asteroid belt just to keep us quiet." The 72 hours ended at noon on a Tuesday. Diane was piloting his cargo ship back to Earth when the first shot was fired. He saw it through his window, a beam of pure white light that streaked across the sky and struck somewhere in the Pacific Ocean. The flash was visible from space. "What the hell was that?" Junho shouted. Diane's radio crackled with emergency broadcasts. A small island had been hit. Uninhabited, thankfully. But the message was clear. The Concorde was demonstrating their power. He thought about his family back in Bizon, his ex-wife, his daughter. He had not spoken to them in months. Now he wondered if he would ever get the chance. In the command center, everyone watched the footage of the strike. The island was simply gone, vaporized in an instant. Nothing left but steam rising from the boiling ocean. The Concorde broadcast again. This was a demonstration. The next strike will not miss populated areas. Surrender now. For a long moment, no one spoke. The weight of the threat hung over them like a physical thing. 8 billion lives, balanced against the pride of one species. Then Taiwan straightened his shoulders. He walked to the communications console and opened a channel to every broadcast system on Earth. "This is Secretary General Yoon Taiwan of the United Earth Defense Council," he said, his voice calm and steady. "I am addressing this message to the Galactic Concorde and to every human being listening." He paused, looking at the images of the alien fleet on the screens around him. "You have demanded our surrender. You have threatened to destroy us. You have demonstrated your power by erasing one of our islands from the face of the Earth." His jaw tightened. "And our answer is simple." He leaned into the microphone. "You missed." Across the world, people heard those words. In homes and offices and shelters and streets and military bases and research stations. 2 words that carried all the defiance humanity had ever felt. The Concorde did not respond immediately. Perhaps they were confused. In 3,000 years of quarantining dangerous species, no one had ever talked back. But humanity was not like the others. Within hours, something remarkable happened. Old enemies put aside their differences. Nations that had been hostile for decades began sharing information. Secret military technologies were declassified. Resources were pooled. For the first time in human history, the entire species united under a single purpose. They would not go quietly. Dion received new orders before he reached Earth. His cargo ship was to be converted for military use. He was to report to a secret facility on the dark side of the moon. When he arrived, he found hundreds of other ships already there, being modified with weapons and armor. Junho looked at the activity with wide eyes. "Are we really going to fight them?" Dion watched a crew of engineers attach missile launchers to a civilian transport. "Looks like it. Can we win?" It was a fair question. The Concorde had ships the size of mountains. Technology thousands of years more advanced. The power to erase islands with a single shot. But Doyen had been a soldier for 20 years. He had learned something important in that time. "Doesn't matter if we can win," he said. "What matters is that we don't give up." Junho was quiet for a moment. Then he smiled, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Well, if we're going to die, at least we'll do it with style." Diane clapped him on the shoulder. "That's the spirit." Far away, in the cold darkness between planets, the Concorde fleet began to move. They had waited long enough. If the humans would not surrender, then they would be made an example. The first battle for Earth was about to begin. The Concorde had energy shields. They had plasma weapons. They had ships that could cross between stars in the blink of an eye. Humanity had rocks. But as Cho Sunwoo liked to say, it was all about how fast you threw them. Sunwoo was 28 years old and had never planned to build weapons. She was an engineer from Bizon who had designed antimatter containment systems for power plants. Clean energy. Peaceful technology. That was supposed to be her life's work. Now she stood in a massive underground facility beneath the moon's surface, surrounded by equations and blueprints that would have gotten her arrested just 2 weeks ago. The math is simple, she explained to the gathered military officers. She pointed at a diagram on the screen. Their shields are designed to stop energy weapons. Lasers, plasma, radiation. They disperse the energy across the shield surface and bleed it off harmlessly. So we can't hurt them, said a Chinese general, frowning. With energy weapons, no. But their shields have a weakness. Sun Wu smiled, and there was something dangerous in her eyes. They're terrible against kinetic impacts. Physical objects moving at high speeds. The shield can't disperse momentum the way it disperses energy. Hit them hard enough, fast enough, and you go right through. How fast are we talking? At least 10% the speed of light. Preferably more. The room went quiet. 10% light speed. Nothing humanity had ever built could move that fast. We don't have weapons like that, the general said. We do now. Sung Woo changed the image on the screen. It showed a simple metal rod, about 10 meters long and 1 meter wide. We've been mining asteroids for 20 years. We have mass drivers that can launch ore containers at incredible speeds. With some modifications, we can launch these. She tapped the rod. Tungsten penetrators. We call them rods from God. At 12% light speed, each one carries more energy than a nuclear bomb. And we can make thousands of them. The general leaned forward, suddenly interested. How soon can you have them ready? We're already building them. Across the solar system, the Concorde fleet moved slowly toward Earth. They were in no hurry. They had done this 47 times before. The pattern was always the same. Demonstrate power. Issue demands. Eliminate resistance. Sterilize the planet. Move on. The commander of the fleet, a being whose name could not be pronounced by human tongues, watched the blue planet grow larger in the view screen. Such a small world. Such a fragile species. He almost felt sorry for them. Almost. Status report, he commanded. The humans have mobilized their primitive vessels, his subordinate replied. Approximately 200 ships. None larger than a small asteroid. They appear to be forming a defensive line near their moon. The commander made a sound that might have been laughter. 200 ships against 17 Concorde destroyers. They are either very brave or very stupid. Perhaps both, Commander. Perhaps. Order the fleet to advance. We will end this quickly. Diane sat in the pilot's seat of the Silver Moon, now bristling with missile launches and armor plates. Around him, a fleet of converted civilian ships formed a ragged line. Cargo haulers, mining vessels, passenger transports. None of them were designed for combat. But then again, neither were the people flying them. Junho was running final checks on their weapon systems. His hands were shaking, but his voice was steady. All systems green. Missiles armed. Ready to fly. Good. Diane looked at the tactical display. The Concorde fleet was approaching, their massive ships moving with the confidence of predators who had never met a prey that could fight back. Remember the plan. We're not trying to win this fight. We're not. We're buying time. The real weapons aren't ready yet. We just need to keep them busy. Junho nodded, though he didn't look reassured. How long do we need to buy? As long as we can. The battle began without warning. The Concorde ships opened fire first, beams of blue light lancing across the darkness. Human ships exploded. Dozens in the first seconds. The formation scattered, each vessel trying to survive. Diane threw the Silver Moon into a desperate spiral, dodging a beam that would have cut them in half. Beside him, Junho was screaming something, but he couldn't hear over the roar of the engines. Fire everything, Diane shouted. Missiles streaked from their ship toward the nearest Concorde destroyer. They crossed the distance in seconds and struck the alien shields. Explosions bloomed against the blue barrier. The shield didn't even flicker. No effect, Junho reported, his voice high with fear. It's not working. Nothing's working. All around them, human ships were dying. The converted vessels were no match for Concorde technology. It was a massacre. But they kept fighting. A cargo hauler rammed itself directly into a Concorde ship shield, its hull crumpling on impact. A mining vessel fired its mass drivers at point-blank range, pelting the enemy with ore containers. A passenger transport, its weapons already destroyed, simply flew in circles around the destroyer, forcing it to track the small ship instead of firing at others. They were buying time. Second by second. Life by life? In the command center on Earth, Taiwan watched the battle with clenched fists. The casualty numbers were climbing. Ships were being destroyed faster than he could count. How much longer? He asked. Gina checked her console. Sungwoo says 10 more minutes. We don't have 10 minutes. Then we'll make 10 minutes. She grabbed the microphone and broadcast to the fleet. All ships, this is Dr. Park, Gina. I know you're scared. I know it looks hopeless. But I need you to hold on just a little longer. Help is coming. Please, hold on. In the silver moon, Doing heard her voice and felt something stir in his chest. He didn't know this woman. He had never met her. But there was something in her voice that made him want to believe. You heard her, he said to Junho. We hold. With what? We're almost out of missiles. Then we get creative. Diane pushed the engines to maximum and flew directly at the Concorde flagship. The massive ship loomed before him, its surface covered in weapons and sensors. A beam lanced out, missing them by meters. What are you doing? Junho screamed. Being creative. He flew along the surface of the destroyer, so close that the larger ship couldn't target them without hitting itself. Behind them, other human ships followed his lead, using the enemy vessels as shields. The Concorde commander watched this with growing frustration. They are using our own ships against us, he observed. Primitive but effective. Should we adjust our formation? No, this changes nothing. We will simply, an alarm, cut him off. Something was approaching. Multiple somethings. Moving at speeds that shouldn't be possible. The first rod hit a Concorde cruiser at 12% the speed of light. There was no explosion. No flash of light. One moment the ship was there. The next moment, there was only a cloud of expanding debris where it had been. The second rod hit. Then the third. Then dozens more, screaming in from the asteroid belt like the fists of an angry god. In his cargo ship, Diane watched in disbelief as Concorde vessels simply ceased to exist. One after another, the massive destroyers were torn apart by invisible impacts. What is that? Junho whispered. That, Doyen said, a smile spreading across his face, is humanity getting creative. The Concorde fleet broke formation. For the first time in 3,000 years, they ran. The remaining ships retreated beyond Jupiter, leaving behind the wreckage of their destroyed vessels. In the command center, cheering erupted. People hugged each other. Some wept with relief. But Taiwan did not celebrate. He stared at the tactical display, watching the enemy ships regroup in the outer solar system. They'll be back, he said quietly. Gina nodded. I know. And they'll come with more ships. More weapons. Now that they know we can fight back, then we'll be ready. Gina looked at the screen where Sunwoo's team was already preparing another wave of kinetic weapons. We'll always be ready. Far away, in his retreating flagship, the Concorde commander stared at the wreckage of his fleet. 7 ships destroyed. 7. In 3,000 years, they had never lost a single vessel to a quarantine species. His subordinate approached nervously. "Commander, what are your orders?" The commander was silent for a long moment. Then he spoke, his voice cold with something that might have been fear. "Contact the council. Tell them the humans are not what we expected. Tell them we need everything. Every ship. Every weapon." He turned to look at the distant blue dot that was Earth. "This species must be eliminated. At any cost." The first battle was over. Humanity had survived. But the war was just beginning. The victory brought questions. Why had the Concorde quarantined Earth? Why were they so afraid of a species that could not even travel between stars? What made humanity so dangerous that an entire galactic civilization had spent 3,000 years keeping them silent? Gina needed to find answers. And she knew exactly where to look. The object in the asteroid belt. The thing that had blocked humanity's signals for millennia. It was still out there, still orbiting in the darkness between Mars and Jupiter. If there were answers anywhere, they would be there. "It's too dangerous," Taiwan said when she proposed the mission. "The Concorde fleet is regrouping. They could attack at any moment. Which is exactly why we need to go now." Gina leaned forward, her eyes intense. "That station has been watching us for 3,000 years. It has records, data, the truth about why they fear us. If we can find that truth, maybe we can use it." Taiwan studied her face. He saw determination there. And something else. "Something personal? This is about your father, isn't it?" Gina's expression flickered. "He found something 20 years ago. Something they killed him for. I need to know what it was." After a long silence, Taiwan nodded. "Take a small team. Stay quiet. Get in, get what you can, and get out." The mission crew was small. Diane piloted, because he was the best and because he volunteered. Jung-ho came along because he refused to let Diane go alone. Myre joined them to translate anything they found. And Gina led them, because this was her journey. The silver moon slipped away from Earth in the dead of night, running silent, its engines barely whispering. They crossed the distance to the asteroid belt in 3 days, hiding among the rocks and debris. The Concorde station was larger than Gina had imagined. It was built into an asteroid the size of a small city, covered in antennae and sensor arrays that pointed in every direction. But it looked old, abandoned. The lights that had once glowed on its surface were dark. "No life signs," Junho reported, scanning the structure. "No power signatures. I think it's been empty for a long time." "The Concorde stopped maintaining it," Myre guessed. "They probably automated everything centuries ago." Diane brought them in slowly, docking at an ancient airlock that groaned with age. The interior was cold and dark, filled with dust that had not been disturbed in hundreds of years. They moved through corridors built for beings that were not human. The ceilings were too high. The doors were too wide. Strange symbols covered the walls, glowing faintly with stored power. Myre photographed everything, her translator working overtime to decode the alien language. "This way," she said, pointing down a long hallway. "I think the main data center is through here." The data center was a vast chamber filled with crystalline structures that hummed with stored information. Myre connected her equipment and began downloading everything she could access. While they waited, Gina explored the room. In a corner, she found something that made her heart stop. A human skeleton dot. It was old. Very old, but the clothes it wore were unmistakably Korean. And around its neck hung an identification badge. Park Sung-ho. Her father's name. Gina fell to her knees beside the remains. She had always known, somewhere deep inside. She had always known he hadn't died in a fire. But seeing the proof, touching the cold bones of the man who had raised her, was something else entirely. "He found this place," she whispered. 20 years ago. He found it, and they killed him for it. Diane knelt beside her, his face grim. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Be angry. Gina's voice hardened. He died for this. He died for the truth. Let's make sure we find it. Marie's equipment beeped. The download was complete. She began scrolling through the data, her face growing paler with each screen. I found it, she said. I found why they quarantined us. Everyone gathered around her display. Mireille took a deep breath and began to read. 3,200 years ago, Concorde observation probes detected a developing species on the third planet of the Sol system. Initial assessment classified them as standard pre-technological. No threat. But follow-up observations revealed anomalies. She scrolled down. The species displayed unprecedented adaptability. They survived in every environment. They recovered from setbacks that would have destroyed other civilizations. And their rate of technological development was accelerating faster than any species in recorded history. So they were scared of our potential. Diane said, It's worse than that. Marie's voice shook. They ran predictive models. Thousands of them. Every model showed the same result. Within 10,000 years of achieving interstellar travel, humans would become the dominant species in the galaxy. Dominant how? Gina asked. Not through war. That's what's strange. Through integration. Mireille read directly from the screen. Human cultural patterns display aggressive mimetic properties. Other species exposed to human art, music, language, and philosophy show rapid adoption rates. Human ideas spread faster than disease. Within 3 generations of contact, any species begins to think like humans, act like humans, want what humans want. She looked up at them with wide eyes. They didn't quarantine us because they thought we would conquer them. They quarantined us because they thought we would change them, turn them into something more like us. Junho laughed nervously. So we're too likable? That's why they want to kill us? Not likable, infectious. Mireille shook her head. They saw human culture as a virus, something that would spread across the galaxy and transform everything it touched. They couldn't stop it once it started. So they decided to stop it before it began. Gina stared at the data, her mind racing. Her father had found this. He had discovered that humanity was not quarantined because they were weak, but because they were strong. So strong that an entire galaxy was afraid of what they might become. And now she understood what she had to do. Download everything, she ordered. All of it. Every file, every record, every piece of data. There's too much, Mireille said. It would take days. Then take the important parts. The quarantine records. The predictive models. And anything about other species. Gina's eyes burned with purpose. We're not the only ones they've done this to. 47 species, remember. Maybe some of them are still out there. Maybe they're watching and listening, just like we were. The download continued as Gina explored further. In another section of the database, she found communication logs. Messages sent to Concorde headquarters over the centuries. Most were routine reports. But one, dated 20 years ago, caught her attention. Breach detected. Human scientists accessed outer monitoring systems. Termination authorized and completed. Recommend increased surveillance. That was it. One sentence. Her father's life and death reduced to a routine report. Gina felt tears burn in her eyes, but she forced them back. There would be time to grieve later. Right now, she had work to do. They left the station as quietly as they had come, carrying data drives full of stolen secrets. The journey back to Earth felt longer. Gina spent most of it sitting alone, holding her father's identification badge and thinking about everything they had learned. When they arrived, Taiwan was waiting for them. His face was grave. "The Concorde fleet has grown," he said. "They're calling in ships from across the galaxy. 300 vessels are gathering beyond Jupiter. Then we need to act fast." Gina handed him the data drives. "We found everything. The truth about the quarantine, the records of every species they've destroyed, and their greatest fear." She told him about human culture, about how the Concorde saw humanity not as a military threat, but as an existential one, about how they believed human ideas could transform entire civilizations. Taiwan listened in silence. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "They're afraid of our ideas," he said slowly. "Yes, then we should give them something to really be afraid of." Taiwan called an emergency session of the World Council. Every nation's leader attended, and Gina told them what she had found. The reaction was immediate. Some were angry, some were frightened, some were proud, but all of them agreed on one thing. If humanity was going to die, they would not die silent. Within hours, Taiwan addressed the entire planet. His speech was broadcast on every channel, in every language, to every person on Earth. "For 3,000 years we were kept in a cage," he said. "For 3,000 years, someone decided that our ideas were too dangerous to be heard. They killed 47 species before us, just for being different, just for having the potential to change things." He paused, his eyes hard. "They feared what we might become. Now let us show them they were right to be afraid. Not because we will destroy them, but because we will inspire them. We will show every species in this galaxy that there is another way, a human way." He leaned into the camera. "Starting now, Earth will broadcast everything. Our music, our art, our stories, our history, everything that makes us human. Let the Concorde try to stop us. Let them bring their 300 ships. We will fill the galaxy with our voices, and nothing they do will ever silence us again." The next day, humanity began its greatest transmission. Every radio dish on Earth turned to the stars. Every satellite, every antenna, every communication device that could send a signal into space. They broadcast music from every culture. Symphonies and folk songs, hip-hop and opera. They broadcast art, literature, philosophy, science, mathematics. The sum of human knowledge and creativity, screaming into the void. And somewhere, far across the galaxy, other species heard them. Beings who had been silent for centuries. Species that the Concorde had conquered and controlled. Slaves who had been told that independent thought was dangerous and creativity was a crime. They heard human music and felt something stir in their hearts. They heard human words and remembered dreams they had long forgotten. They heard the message that was hidden in every transmission, repeated in every language humanity had ever spoken. You are not alone. You were never alone. And now, neither are we. In the shadows of occupied worlds, rebellion began to whisper. In the silence of controlled systems, voices started to rise. The galaxy was changing. And Earth, the little blue planet that had been kept silent for 3,000 years, was leading the way. The Concorde's final assault was coming. 300 ships. Everything they had. They would throw all their power against one small world, trying to silence the voice that was waking the galaxy. But humanity was ready. Gina looked up at the stars, thinking of her father. He had died for this moment. He had died for the truth. Now the truth and nothing would ever cage it again. 300 ships darkened the sky above Jupiter. The Concorde had gathered every vessel they could find. Destroyers the size of mountains. Carriers filled with smaller attack craft. Command ships that glowed with terrible power. It was the largest fleet assembled in 1,000 years. All of it aimed at one small planet. On Earth, humanity watched them come. there was no panic, no chaos. People went to work and school. They ate dinner with their families. They lived their lives, because they knew that whatever happened next, they had already won something that could never be taken away. The galaxy was listening. In the command center, Taiwan stood before a room full of generals and scientists. Gina was there. So was Mireille, translating incoming signals from across the stars. And so was Sunwoo, her face hollow with exhaustion, but her eyes bright with purpose. "Status report," Taiwan said. "The fleet will reach Earth orbit in 6 hours," a general reported. "Our defensive positions are ready. We have 12,000 kinetic weapons prepared for launch." "That's not enough," another officer said. "Even if every shot hits, we can't destroy 300 ships." "We don't have to destroy all of them," Gina said. "We just have to survive long enough." "Long enough for what?" Taiwan smiled grimly. "For this." He gestured at Sunwoo. She stepped forward, pulling up images on the main screen. "While everyone was watching the Concorde fleet, my team built something else. We call it the lighthouse." The image showed a massive structure hidden on the dark side of the moon, a forest of antennae pointed at the stars, connected to the most powerful transmitters humanity had ever built. "The lighthouse can broadcast directly into Concorde space," Sunwoo explained. "Every world they control, every species under their rule, everything we are, everything we know, everything we believe, will be transmitted to trillions of beings who have never heard a human voice before. Even if Earth falls," Gina added, "our ideas will survive. They'll spread to every corner of the galaxy. The Concorde can destroy our planet, but they can't destroy what we stand for." The room was silent. Then Taiwan spoke. "The lighthouse will activate in 1 hour. Everything after that is about protecting it until the transmission is complete." He looked at each person in the room. "This is not a battle we fight to survive. This is a battle we fight to be remembered. Whatever happens today, the galaxy will never forget what humanity stood for." In the Silver Moon, Doyen listened to Taiwan's speech over the radio. Junho sat beside him, checking their weapons for the 100th time. "Doesn't sound like he expects us to make it," Junho said. "No, he doesn't. And why are we fighting?" Diane thought about the question. He thought about his daughter, who he hadn't seen in 3 years. He thought about all the things he had never said to her. He thought about the life he had wasted running from his past. "Because some things are worth dying for," he said finally. "Because if we don't fight, then everything we are disappears. And I'm not willing to let that happen." Junho was quiet for a moment. Then he laughed, that same nervous laugh he always made when things were bad. "You know what? You're right." He strapped himself into his seat and grabbed the weapons controls. "Let's make them remember us." The Concorde fleet arrived like a storm. They came in waves, their weapons lighting up the darkness with beams of blue fire. Human ships rose to meet them. Cargo vessels and mining ships, converted transports, and hastily built fighters. They were outnumbered. They were outgunned. They fought anyway. The kinetic weapons fired first. 12,000 rods of tungsten, screaming toward the enemy at impossible speeds. Concorde ships exploded. Their shields failed against the kinetic impacts. But there were too many ships, and they kept coming. Doyen flew through the chaos, dodging fire, weaving between explosions. The Silver Moon shook with every near miss. Alarms screamed. Smoke filled the cockpit. "Hull breach in Section 3. Junho shouted. "We're losing atmosphere." "Seal it. Keep firing." They destroyed 2 Concorde fighters before a beam caught their left engine. The ship spun wildly. Diane fought for control, but the damage was too severe. "We're going down," Junho said. "Doyen, we're going down." Doyen looked at his co-pilot, his friend, the man who had stood beside him through everything. "It was an honor," he said. Junho smiled, blood running from a cut on his forehead. "Likewise." The silver moon plunged toward the moon's surface. But in his last moments, Dayun aimed the ship at a Concorde cruiser that was moving toward the lighthouse. The impact destroyed both vessels. In the command center, Gina watched the silver moon vanish from the tactical display. She didn't know Doyan well, but she felt his loss like a physical blow. "The lighthouse is at 50% transmission," Myray reported. "We need more time." "How much more?" 20 minutes. 20 minutes. An eternity in battle. More human ships fell. The Concorde fleet pushed closer, but humanity refused to break. Every time a ship was destroyed, another took its place. Pilots who knew they were going to die flew straight into enemy formations, taking as many Concorde vessels with them as they could. And across the galaxy, the lighthouse's signal spread. On a distant world, a species that had been enslaved for centuries heard human music for the first time. They wept. They didn't know why, but they wept. On another world, a scientist who had been forbidden from independent research heard human mathematics. She saw new possibilities, new ideas that the Concorde had tried to suppress. On 100 worlds, 1,000 worlds, beings looked up at the stars and felt something change inside them. The lighthouse reached 90% transmission. The Concorde fleet was close now, almost in range of Earth. Only a handful of human ships remained, but they formed a line, one last defense, ready to give everything they had. Sunwoo's voice came over the radio. "I have one more weapon, a last resort. It will destroy every ship in the solar system, including ours." Taiwan hesitated. "Do it." Across the asteroid belt, hidden charges activated. Antimatter containers placed on hundreds of asteroids. Sunwoo had been planning this for weeks. If Earth fell, she wanted to make sure the Concorde paid the highest price. The first charge detonated. Then another. And another. A chain reaction spread across the solar system. Asteroids exploded. Debris flew at incredible speeds in every direction. The Concorde fleet was caught in a storm of destruction. Ships that had survived kinetic weapons were torn apart by rocks. Ships that had pushed through human defenses were shattered by the cascade of explosions. In minutes, the greatest fleet the Concorde had ever assembled was reduced to wreckage. When the explosions finally stopped, silence fell over the solar system. The lighthouse completed its transmission. 1 year later, the galaxy was a different place. The Concorde had shattered. Their ruling council dissolved when 12 member species declared independence. Former slave worlds formed the Free Systems Alliance, united by the human broadcasts they had received. Earth was rebuilt. The scars of battle remained, but so did the spirit that had carried humanity through. Memorials were built for those who had fallen. Their names were carved in stone and light, never to be forgotten. Myray served as Earth's first ambassador to the Free Systems. She traveled to worlds that had never seen a human, carrying messages of friendship and hope. Sunwoo led the construction of humanity's first interstellar ship. They named it the Doyan, after the pilot who had given his life to protect the lighthouse. Junho's name was painted on the hull beside it, and Gina returned to her telescope. She sat in the same control room where everything had started, surrounded by the same screens and equipment. But now, when she looked at the data streams, she didn't see silence. She saw signals, hundreds of them, thousands, species reaching out from across the galaxy, adding their voices to the chorus that humanity had started. Her father's identification badge hung on the wall beside her, a reminder of what had been sacrificed and what had been gained. A new signal appeared on her screen. She read the translation and smiled. It was from a world on the far side of the galaxy, a species that had been alone for 10,000 years. and their message was simple. We hear you. We are coming. Thank you for teaching us. We were not alone. Gina opened a channel and began her reply. The galaxy had kept Earth silent for 3,000 years. It took humanity 6 months to make sure no world would ever be silenced again. And now, among the stars, a new song was beginning. A song of freedom. A song of hope. A song that would echo through the cosmos for as long as there were beings brave enough to sing it. The silence was broken. The consequences were beautiful, and humanity's voice would never be quiet again.